Meeting to order now. Members of the public are invited to participate in this meeting of council by accessing the meeting, which will be live streamed on our Middlesex YouTube channel, or by contacting the municipal clerk to receive a registration link to join the meeting electronically. Members of the public may also attend the meeting here in person at the Ilderton Community Centre, located at 13168 Ilderton Road in Ilderton, Ontario. I'm just going to make a couple of quick opening remarks. So the question is, does your organization have a great idea for a project to increase well-being and build community in Middlesex Centre? And I want to just say as a reminder, Middlesex Centre has funding available through Council Grants Program and the Delaware Hydro Reserve Fund for eligible community groups who wish to run programs or hold special events in the community. You can read all about these programs on our website under the News tab, and applications for both funding programs are due by November 30th. And there is just one quick story that came to light in the last sort of 48 hours. I have a great story to share about Middlesex Centre staff. We recently heard about some travelers to our community who were visiting from across the border, and they found themselves lost on the way to the Stratford Festival. And I'm keeping this very short. It's really I call it a heartwarming story. But the long story short is that Chief Lonnie Fletcher and his wife Brenda spotted the motorists, stopped to help them, and eventually guided them on their way. All was really great. Everything was fine, except then suddenly it turned out a cell phone was left behind by the motorists. And again, long story short, Chief Fletcher made contact and drove all the way to Stratford to deliver the lost phone to the ladies who had traveled on to catch their show. So I just want to acknowledge the chief and say thanks for making Middlesex one of those above and beyond communities. So this is the Reader's Digest version, but I thought it's too good a story not to share. So on that note, I'll move to business. There are no additions to the agenda tonight. I'll look to council members. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, then we can move on to delegations and presentations tonight. We do have a presentation on the 2023 inspection of structures, and Ken's here. Yeah. So we have Ken Leuchtenberg here in attendance on behalf of BM Ross and Associates to provide a presentation regarding report PWE 41-2023, being the 2023 Middlesex Centre Structure Inspection Report. So when you're ready, the floor is yours. I'm going to turn mine off so you can turn yours on. And thank you so much for being here tonight.
Okay, thank you to council and staff for the invitation to come speak today. I'll give her a second as she pulls the slide presentation up, assuming I just have to sit here and everything's just going to happen for me, I'm assuming. So I'm a senior engineer with BM Ross and Associates, and Nick Gowing, I think he might be logged in, just he's visiting. Nick was actually the engineer who did the inspections on your bridges. So if we have any questions that are specific to something that I might not be familiar with, Nick may be able to help us with that. But okay. Yeah, so like you explained, I'm here to talk about your bridge inspection assessments that were completed this past year. And this is kind of a requirement, a legislative requirement, and I'll go through an agenda for the presentation, explain sort of what things I'm going to provide here. So next slide, please. So the scope of the presentation is I'm going to this slide here, and I'm going to explain the inspection methods that we're required to do, a summary of the observations of what we gathered from doing our inspections, some recommended improvements. Some of them are pertaining to maintenance improvements. There's capital improvements that are identified. We'll go through some of that. I'll illustrate some of the specific examples of your bridges within the municipality, talk about some cost reduction possibilities, some concluding comments, and then questions. But if council should have questions throughout, feel free to raise your hand and let me know, and I'll try to help you as we go. So the scope of the assessment, we prepare the maps of all the structural locations within the municipality, and review information from previous inspection reports. Within the municipality, there was 152 structures that were assessed, 27 of which were actually within the 2 meter to 3 meter span, which is smaller than what's legislatively required. But as Andrew mentioned, he asked us to proceed with them. And as we'll explain later, there's some of them that are in poor condition. So it was suggested that we should include them in the assessment so that we can make sure that repairs for those are being addressed. So when we do our assessment in the fields, we do a visual inspection of all the structures. We assemble the notes in this OSIM format. Then we do some analysis of the data and develop a general list of observations, prioritize the list of needs, and assign timelines and calculate probable costs for the repair work that's been identified. And then we prepare a report, present the results, and one other thing, we usually provide digital information that helps for your asset management so that your people can upload that information for asset management purposes. So the legislative requirements, Ontario Regulation 104/97, it's and it's been subsequently amended there. It's required that all bridges be inspected under the supervision of a professional engineer every 2 years. So that's why I think 2 years ago, or maybe it's not 2 years ago, maybe I did it digitally 2 years ago in the presentation, but every 2 years your bridges have to be reviewed. And these inspections are carried out in accordance with this Ontario Structural Inspection Manual. It's often referred to as OSIM. So when I mentioned the OSIM earlier, it's just an acronym short form for it. And it's basically the format that's being used to complete the work and how you assemble the information and put it together in a format. So if somebody else wants to look at inspections from one municipality to another, they're generally fairly similar format and they can follow through with nowhere to look for the information. And in Ontario, the definition of a bridge is any structure with a span greater than 3 meters. So that could be a culvert, could be a bridge, it could be multiple culverts. If you've got 3 culverts in a row that are a little under 3 meters, the total span is what equates to come up with a 3 meters. Next slide. So the bridge inspections, as per the OSIM manual, we will record measurements, take photos of the bridges when we're in the field. And the major components, we assess them and we provide some, identify any defects that we see. We assign condition ratings to the components based on a visual observation. We do not do destructive testing. If we see some concerns that we think may have to be addressed or something that we're really concerned with, we may recommend some additional investigation, and that may include some destructive testing. But as part of the OSIM, we're not doing destructive testing. We calculate the bridge condition index scores, which are called as BCI for short. It's just a statistical condition rating for the bridges. A timeline for the repairs, and based on the opinion of the engineer, we may say some of the repairs are urgent, should be completed right away. It could be a 1 year timeline, could be 1 to 5 or 6 to 10 is usually what's included on the OSIM form. But as requested from your municipality, you've asked to provide the flag of things that are coming in the future. So we also provided some comments on things that we anticipate might be required in the 11 to 20 year time period. We identify needs for additional investigation, as mentioned earlier. We calculate probable costs for the repair needs, and then we prioritize the needs using a scoring system of the engineer's opinion and the engineer's opinion. Next slide, please. So the scoring system that I'm presenting here is just something we've developed, and we use it with roads and bridges and buildings just as a method to kind of narrow down what things we think should be prioritized. It's just a theoretical scoring system. But what we do is, if you look at I like to jump to the center section first when I'm explaining this, which is the probability of failure or your condition rating of the bridge. So we'll give it a score out of 5 for the condition rating for the bridge, and that's usually using the BCI number. And then at the top, we have a performance grade. So the performance grade is we take a look at the bridge and we say, is this bridge suitable for its application? Say if the bridge is a culvert that's really narrow on a busy road that's got a lot of traffic, you might give it a lower score because it's not really up to the way you'd like to have for that site. Similarly, you might have a bridge with a load limit, so that one's not suitable for its intended design purpose. Or it could be a bridge that's really narrow. Might be a bridge that's, say, 6.2 meters wide and you're trying to put 2 lanes, so it's really tight. Those bridges, you probably don't want them. You'd like to kind of fix them up sooner and maybe consider replacing them. So we penalize them a little bit in our scoring system. And then at the bottom, the consequence of failure score, that's based on traffic data. So we'll look at your AADT, the statistical information that we'll get from the municipality. And if a bridge is on a really busy road, it's a bridge that you probably want to have it ranked higher on your priority score. We take those scores and we push them together, and we come up with a priority score that's out of 20, and we just use that as a guide. But as we point out there below, the scoring system doesn't include some things like preventative maintenance. And if you use preventative maintenance, those are usually desired because it'll save some of your costs in the future. So we have to keep an eye on them. And similarly, if we have some outstanding safety needs, the repair for that bridge might be pushed ahead, irregardless of what the scoring system's suggesting. So next slide, please. This slide, I'll try to go through quickly. It's kind of hard to read the information at the top. Basically, that explains how the scoring system was set up. And the category on the left is your traffic data and how the scores were assigned of 1 to 5. The center is your performance grade, the factors we might take into consideration for that score. And on the right-hand side is your BCI, your probability of failure score. And as I explained, we're looking at the slide before, it's a simplified scoring method just to help prioritize your needs. And it does develop some risk scores and level of service scores that could be used if you so choose. And like I said, the theoretical score is used as a guide, but there's other factors you have to take into consideration when you're prioritizing the bridge needs. Next slide, please. So with the bridges within your municipality, we've assembled this slide to illustrate the age of the bridges. It's sort of helpful for people to understand kind of where you're at based on the ages, because a typical life expectancy for a bridge is 80 years. And typically there's repairs that take place in about the 30 to 60 year period, one of those two, or sometimes both. And then culverts, if you have a corrugated steel culvert, the traditional style that we've put in the past, the suspected life is typically about 50 years for those, because they start to either rust through or different things. There are other culverts and different coating systems that are being applied and provided now that would last, help the culverts last longer. But most of the ones that we're looking at for repairs are traditional corrugated steel pipes. But looking at it, you've got 51 of the, there's 99 culverts and there's 51 bridges within your municipality. There's 99 culverts and there's 2 retaining walls that were also reviewed as part of our assessment. And when you look at the table there, we have 5 structures that are over 80 years old and 26 of them that are under 25 years old. And the average age is 47 years. So with this graph that we have presented now, this is the BCI, so that's that bridge condition index score. And with that score, it scores out of 100. But once it gets under 40, it's generally considered that the structure is in poor condition because there's enough defects that will affect the scoring. 21 of the structures had scores that were under 40, and the average BCI score within of all the structures we've reviewed was 63. If you look at the distribution, you've got a few that are 100, basically scored really well, that are in pretty good condition. Some of those are probably fairly new ones. You've got a cluster in about the 50 to 80 range, which is in that, fair to good, and a few that are kind of getting down into the hard part. Just a little bit of additional information. One of the things that we provided in the report was we pointed out that if you look at your bridges, the average score for them was 67.5. With the culverts that were over 3 meters, the average score was 64. But with the culverts that we were asked to assess that are under 3 meters, the average score was 50. So there's a cluster of those ones, as I explained earlier, those additional ones that we reviewed that are in poor condition. And when we get to the recommendations, some of the recommendations pertain to addressing that issue with some of those smaller culverts. Next slide, please. So this graph, this is just a different way of showing that information. It kind of combines the last two, where the blue lines indicate the average BCI for a bridge within that decade. And then the red line, or actually that's got that number. We've got the number of bridges within there. And you can see the number of structures, and you can see the average BCIs within those decades. And you'll notice that bridges that are really new have a really high BCI. And as you work your way to the left in the graph, as they get older, the conditions generally go down. There's one that happens to be in 1930, and it could be quite possible that there was a rehabilitation done to that bridge. It's maybe brought its BCI number or condition back up, and that may be why it's kind of got appears a little abnormal in the graph, but that can happen because bridge conditions are based on their condition, not necessarily their age. So, next slide. So going through, we kind of look for some things and we try to point them out if we identify them in the field, and we have in the individual bridge reports that we provide to staff. These are some of the things that we might identify on the individual reports, but it's also provided in our overall report as a general recommendation to staff to keep these things in mind for routine maintenance. It includes things like cleaning the bearing seats, and the bearing seats, that's on the abutments that hold up the end of the bridge deck. The bearing seat is where the girder sort of sits. And if debris and water accumulate in that area, the bottom of that girder tends to deteriorate. And the girders under your bridge deck, they're a key component and an expensive component, because if you have to repair them, sometimes you have to do things like jacking up the end of the deck and doing other things to do repairs. So cleaning that area out, and pressure washing expansion joint seals to check for leaks. Again, that's this expansion joint seal is right above that bearing seat. It allows for expansion and contraction of the bridge deck. But over time, those seals, they start to wear, and moisture can get down through there and cause deterioration of your girders. We recommend cleaning gravel off the curbs and the deck, because the gravel accumulates and moisture and stuff will kind of build up, and then it'll cause the concrete to deteriorate. We recommend resealing joints in the walls with caulking. Remove brush and logs that might kind of block up your culverts. Sometimes you have trees that float down and they plug the end of the culverts. Restore eroded stream banks with riprap or material like that to protect the slopes from eroding. Grade the shoulders to help ensure that the water is shedding off in advance of the bridges. And minor guide rail or parapet wall handrail repairs might be identified. There's other things to kind of keep an eye on. Okay, so we should jump to the next slide. That's fine. I'm not going to go through all this. This is just an example of the information that we've sort of identified with the individual bridges, and it's provided to staff, and then they can kind of work their way through the list of the maintenance items. And I think it might extend on to the next slide with just a little more, a few more needs that were kind of identified during our review. So that's just the extension to it. Now if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about some general comments. So general comments from our review and looking at the reports from the different bridges. Some of the culverts, they appear structurally sound, but replacement has been proposed because they're quite narrow, and you don't have their wider culverts provide a safer platform for vehicles to go over. So that's and agriculture equipment as well. So that's one of the reasons where sometimes we haven't recommended repairs to smaller culverts. We've recommended replacements. Numerous bridges with leaking expansion joints at the end of the deck were identified. So this is a preventative maintenance activity that we're often recommending to try to preserve the structural integrity of the bridge, but also to kind of minimize your costs in the future to kind of fix it right before it gets real bad. Numerous bridge deck drains. We noticed some of them are quite short. So then the water comes off the bridge deck, goes through the drain, and it kind of dribbles along the bottom edge of the deck. It doesn't get away. So we usually recommend, if we see that, there's a few of them we noticed that were quite short. And generally recommending repairs to your bridge to preserve the integrity of the bridge to help extend their life. They're expensive, so if we can extend, like we generally say, a life expectancy of 80. But if you're able to preserve your bridges and keep them in good condition, we're of the opinion that you can push that beyond that 80 at times. It's just have to do the preventative maintenance at the right time. So major repairs or replacement needs. There's a combination of engineering judgment timelines that are used with the OSIM reports and the theoretical scoring to help prioritize that work. There's needs that are to address some safety concerns and preventative maintenance, like we mentioned, those will be prioritized. Sometimes other options are chosen, temporary repairs to delay repairs. Sometimes you might decide that with this bridge, it's going to be ultimately replaced. So although there's a need and there's some repairs there, we might recommend that you just do nothing for a little while and plan for a replacement in the not too distant future. Or eventually there's other option is it might be a bridge that you decide you're going to close and you want to just let it continue until it's time to close the structure. Probable cost and assumed repair costs and replacement needs are calculated based on 2023 costs. So when you're looking at work that you may have to do in the future, you should inflate accordingly. And unfortunately, one of the things we found in the last year going through costing, there's been quite an increase in construction costs in the last few years, not only with bridge repair work, but with road work and everything. So it increases your repair cost and your replacement value of all your bridges. Next slide. So this slide and the next one, we have a detailed list of the structures that were identified, and it's kind of hard to, even if I take my glasses off, it's hard to read the text on the screen, but the ones that are at the top of the list are sort of the higher priority. We've actually put the ones up there that have already been awarded. They're listed at the top of that list. There's some additional ones there that are in process of being designed for repair work down further. And we've got a bunch of other ones. And we show the BCI number, which we talked about earlier. We show the suggested anticipated year for the work. And some of that was through discussion with staff, where they thought it should be placed for that they could accommodate it. There's those theoretical priority scoring and the costs that we provided. So there's another slide with that, which is basically the same information, just some additional ones. I don't think we will go through those into much detail right now. So there's also another list that shows the needs in the 6 to 10 year period. Same sort of information, but again, you're trying to predict costs for work that's 6 to 10 years in the future. So when you get closer to that date, you should review the budget and update it accordingly, and usually get an updated estimate for what the costs are going to be. So we can jump ahead another 1 or 2 slides. That's the 6 to 10 year. And then there's 11 to 20 year period that's on the next one. So again, those are just things that we see that, hey, this structure is going to have issues sometime in the future, and we're just trying to bring it to your attention and maybe have some assistance for your asset management to try to anticipate that there are other things coming down the line. Okay, the next few slides, we have a few images here so we can talk about, so we can illustrate some of the projects and some of the needs that are identified. With the first one there on the left, that's C558. It's a replacement of Fernhill Drive culvert. That one, there was a washout underneath. I think that's the one that got closed. And one of the things I just might mention, I noticed with that one, it rusted through in the center of the culvert. And often culverts have what we call a cutoff wall at both ends. This one was put in, it didn't have a cutoff wall at the downstream end. So when the hole was created in the center of the culvert and water started pushing its way in, it found its way through out the downstream end of the culvert. And as a result, when the water's coming in, it slowly pulls a little bit of material out, and it kind of created a cavity underneath the structure, and that contributed to its demise, basically. The other structures there that are listed, these are projects that have been awarded already. B314 is repairs to the Westminster Drive Bridge. There's the Vanek Road structures and the Carriage Lane B301. Those are the four that have already been awarded for construction. This structure, it's a B108 Medway Road structure. And with this one, the scope of the work is a little bit different. We're proposing not just repairing it, but we're converting the end of the abutment to a semi-integral abutment. So we've talked about the fact that most bridges have an expansion joint seal at the end of the bridge deck. The other option you can have is what's called a semi-integral abutment, where you remove that joint, you extend the deck, and you kind of hook it over the top of the abutment. And the expansion and contraction takes place behind the abutment, and it pushes the gravel and the asphalt material. You'll saw cut the asphalt, but you've eliminated that joint. There's no expansion and contraction joint right there. It just pushes the asphalt and the gravel back a little bit. And they found at one time they figured, yes, we got to have this expansion and contraction. But what they found over time, that it can expand and contract, pushing up against the gravel beyond that, and the noticeable impact on the road is minimal. So sometimes you'll get a little bit of cracking in the asphalt. You might have to do a repair, but by eliminating that expansion joint, now you don't have the water coming down on those girders at the end of the bridge, on that bearing seat, and it's just it eliminates the need for hopefully a subsequent repair. So with that structure, we've got that converting to a semi-integral abutment bridge. Replacing guide rails on the approaches. The guide rails, you notice the guide rails kind of drop down on the approach to the bridge. That's an old standard that they don't recommend now, because if a vehicle were to hit it, it might be launched. So when the opportunity comes, you're doing work on a bridge, we usually recommend bringing it up to the current standard. Patch repairs to the deck top. And while doing all that work, we would waterproof repave the deck. Next slide. This structure, B120, it's on 9 Mile Road. Similar, we're looking at converting to a semi-integral abutment bridge, replacing the curbs and railings, patch repairs on the bridge deck, replacing the guide rail on the approach. It's similar, I think the guide rails drop down on the approaches, and waterproofing and paving the deck. The photos show some of the concrete deterioration that's taking place on the curb and right around that joint, which allows moisture to penetrate down in. And the railings on there, it's aluminum railings on them, but those are a little lower than what you would normally see to comply with current standards. So while we're doing all this other work, it's an opportunity to bring it up to current standards and replace the railings. Okay, the structure C580, this is one of the new ones that was identified as a structure they want us to review. It's a New Ontario road. It's a shorter one. It's only 1.8 meters or 6 feet span. But one of the things that's happened in the one abutment, it's out of plumb. So the bottom of the abutment's in, and you can see it's on about a 4-inch slope from the bottom to the top. And the concern is over time that could kick right in. So it's recommended for replacement. And I think this is the one we actually suggest putting a load limit on just until we can get that one replaced. Next slide, please. This is a Coldstream Road structure. With this one, we're just planning to replace the seals on the end of the bridge instead of doing that semi-integral abutment. The plan was to replace the seals on the end, patch repair the bearing pedestals and girders, replace the deck drains, patch repair the deck top, waterproof and pave. One of the reasons I'm trying to remember why we made that decision with this one, just to replace the seals. It could be that it's an older bridge. And if you're going to spend a little bit extra to do that conversion to semi-integral abutment, you'd rather do that on a newer bridge that you anticipate you're going to have a lot more life with. But if the bridge is already 60 years old or something like that, you're like, let's repair it and seal it. And, it should certainly get to the end of its anticipated life, but it's usually costs a little more to do that conversion. So in this one, it was discussed with staff and it was decided we would leave it and repair it, keeping the same style of joint at the end, sort of thing. Okay, next slide. This is photos of one of the structure is C-153 on 13 Mile Road. He provided a top photo showing what it looked like in 2021. The photos on the bottom show it in 2023. So it's continuing to deteriorate. It's one of those shorter span structures that we're recommending for replacement. And it's a shorter span structure, but it's also a narrower structure. So that's why we're recommending replacement. Okay, next. This one's C-572. It's on Ivan Drive. The culvert structure, it's overall in poor condition. Actually, this is the one that we recommended a load limit on in May. And deterioration rate, it's likely going to increase the rate of deterioration because you can see along the bottom edge that there's an opening and water flow can come and kind of encourage the deterioration and pulling out gravel between or concrete between that joint that's down there. Next there. Okay. Now, staff asked us to provide some comments on cost reducing possibilities. So, and they mentioned that there might be an interest to have some of your staff do some of the work. So, in conjunction with that, we were kind of discussing possible methods that might and what you might be able to realistically expect with trying to implement that approach. So the first thing we've got on there, we talk about combining like projects or geographically close projects into one contract. It has the potential to save some construction costs. And we found that's been effective at different times, where if you've got two bridges in close proximity, you put them together as one contract. The only thing I want to caution is don't get too carried away. Like, don't try to put like 6 bridges together, because you might find that a lot of contractors that might otherwise bid on it will look at it and say, oh, that's too big a project. I don't want to tackle that. So you have to pick and choose a little bit. And what I say, sometimes you try to get it in a sweet spot, like get some economies of scale into a range where contractors will still be interested and want to bid on the project. The next option listed there is pre-purchasing of corrugated steel pipes or concrete box culverts. Then you provide or also alternatively, it could be providing access to municipal pits, or the municipal staff might be hauling some of the soils or the granulars to the project. That's an option. You're kind of taking the cost that the contractor would have to spend, and you've got your staff doing some of that work. So if they're available, that could be an option. There's potential for reducing some of the costs with that. The next one listed was completing, lower complexity repairs, or maybe those culvert replacements, which we identified. There's quite a few of them that were identified in our assessment. If your staff were able and familiar with the process, and they could do some of those replacements themselves. And we're seeing there's a potential for a 35% cost reduction. But keep in mind, when we're doing that, we're coming up with those cost reductions. We're taking basically the labor cost out of the construction is what we're thinking of. So that means it's your staff doing the work versus hiring a contractor to do the work. So it's there's potential cost savings, but it's using your staff for that instead of maybe other things. So concluding summary. So we've recommended a combination of culvert and bridge repairs and maintenance work has been identified within the assessment. There's only 2 small span bridge replacements proposed within the next 20 years. So most of your larger bridges just focusing on repairs at this time. There's 10.4 million of needs identified to be completed within the next 5 years. Well, that works out to $2 million per year. And there's 11.2 million of needs identified to be completed in the 6 to 10 year. And again, that works out just over $2 million per year. 2.8 million of needs are identified to be completed in the 10 to 20, which that works out to be a smaller number during that time period. But keep in mind, that's trying to identify things 10 to 20 years in the future. So other things might come up. Also being realistic, some of the things that you hope to complete within that first 10-year period, sometimes they get delayed and they get pushed back into that 11 to 20 years. Sometimes that happens. So there's approximately 286,000 of maintenance needs that were identified. These are estimates based on, say, if you were to hire a contractor to do the work, but it's often completed by your own staff. So we just, there's a place to put a number in there. So we put a number on based on what we think it would cost if you hired somebody else to do that. And the last point there is a follow-up for inspections is required every 2 years. And therefore, priorities for future work may change when you're doing subsequent inspections. You might find a need to adjust the priorities. And I think that concludes the presentation that I prepared. Any questions?
Thank you for that. There's a lot to digest in there. I'm going to look to council then for questions. I'll start with Councillor Burrs.
Okay, it's Ken, right? Okay, yeah. One thing we struggle with is nailing our budget for what it might cost to do that. We're finding things are coming in quite a bit higher than anticipated. You're using a costing book that you update every year, correct? Something like that. Like you put a cost on all this stuff for us, do you not?
So what we do when we do our costing, we've got quite a few construction projects that we have going on every year. And what we do is we keep track of different activities like concrete repairs or waterproofing in the deck or girder replacements. We keep track of them from all the past projects that we're doing. And each year we update what the average cost was over the last year. So then we use that information. So there's no book out there. We take the information from what we've seen in our own construction projects, and we use that to try to estimate what we think it's going to cost on these projects. But I will admit this last couple of years, it's been a lot trickier to try to estimate. And what sometimes happens is you put it out and, oh, we only got 2 bids. Well, darn, like hopefully one of them's a good one, because if there's only 2 bids, you might, you know, they may not be that hungry or they may have other work. So I understand your challenge, and we have the same challenge trying to estimate projects lately.
Okay, thanks. No magic.
Excuse me. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Ken. I've been talking to, some contractors and that. And I don't know if you can verify, they said that the steel culverts we put in the 50s and 60s were better material than the ones we've got in the 70s and 80s. So what we're getting into is we've got 40 years worth of steel culverts that are all aging within about 10 years of one another. Is that truth or myth or?
I don't know. I do know that they don't seem to be asked. I don't know if there's a reason for it, or is it exposure to different environmental factors? I'm not sure, but I do know that some of them are not lasting as long as hoped. One thing I might comment with that, and I briefly touched on it. Lately, we've been not putting in very many corrugated steel pipes. We'll be putting them in corrugated steel pipes with like an aluminized coating or with a plastic coating, different, instead of just being a galvanized pipe, putting in these aluminized or these other ones, because they found they usually perform and last longer, is what we've been told. So that's one thing that's sort of changed, but those products have only been around maybe the last 10 years sort of thing. So they weren't, your culverts that were put in the 70s and 80s would have been the galvanized. And I don't know if I could provide any reason why, but there may be some validity to it. One other thing I will explain, if you've seen your old truss bridges that you see that are around and you wonder, how are these bridges around? They've been here for 100 years and why are they still lasting? One of the things with truss bridges is they will have lower strength steel, but they have a lot of other impurities like copper and other materials that's into the steel. And that steel tends to corrode much slower than the new steel, which is a higher strength. So the steel at that time might be about a 230 MPa steel strength, whereas the new steel that you have will be a 400, and it's a pure, more concentrated material. And because you've got that stronger material, sometimes once it starts to corrode, it just corrodes faster. That is one thing that I have seen on, for example, truss bridges and stuff like that.
And through Madam Mayor, one more question. Like this survey, you did do a few bridges that were under the 3 meters. But like someone will see this report and say, oh, 2 million a year for 5 years. But the truth is we have a lot of culverts that are 2.5 meters. So probably our replacement is more than double this when we factor in all of the culverts we have in the municipality.
Personally, I don't know the extent of how many culverts you have, but there may be some validity to that. I know we're just basing our review on the structure that we've reviewed, and there may be other ones out there. So I guess I don't know if I can answer that question per se without knowing what's out there, sort of thing.
Oh, Deputy Mayor Brennan, go ahead.
Through where it can. Plastic rubberized culverts that are being made now, would they have a tendency to last longer than the steel ones?
So to answer that question, I have to rely on some of the information that we are provided from the suppliers of the materials that have done their testing. What they typically will say is, oh yeah, these plastic coatings will last 100 years. Whereas the aluminized, they'll say 75, 80 years is what they're saying. The one thing though I have to caution is lately we've been putting in more aluminized because the cost for the plastic coating is like 30, 40% more. For some reason, the last few years, the price for those has just gone way up. Whereas aluminized is just a little more expensive than the galvanizing. So most of the clients have opted for the aluminized coating. And that's just lately what they've been doing because of the significant price increase.
And if there's no one else, I did have a question too. Save the best one for last. It's on the concluding summary page. That was where you were talking about the needs, the 386,000 for maintenance. You identified maintenance items for a whole number of items. 386 would cover all of those, I guess is the first question. And to the extent that there are works, the reconstructive works going on, if some of these maintenance pieces aren't done, then how do you, is the goal then to do the 386 every year to make sure that you can keep up? I mean, if there's a new bridge and it needs a little bit repair and maintenance, it'll last that much longer. But if it's an old one and you don't do it, then it's going to tear it even more quickly because I think the rate of decline, it looks like, speeds up over time. Is there a magic formula to that, or is there a place staff should really emphasize their effort toward, or can you just maybe comment on that?
Okay, there's lots of questions there. I'll try to answer them. But so the maintenance needs we've identified that number. There's a couple things with that. Those are things that we've seen when we went around during this inspection, and we're just, to some extent, we're doing that estimate based on trying to estimate what it would be to bring a contractor in. Your guys might do it more cost effectively because they're not doing it the other way. They're just go out and do it. But what I would comment is, over time, as your staff are doing some of those repair and those maintenance needs, they'll start to spot them as they're doing their drive-bys, and they'll say, oh, there's guide rail posts that are leaning and stuff. And they'll start to identify them. And I know they identify some of them already. We're not saying we're the only ones that identify them. They're doing some repairs on their own. But they're not always spending the time walking down under the bridge and looking around underneath and looking at different aspects of the bridge. So that's why we try to identify those other things that they might not be looking for when they're typically doing their drive around. But to say that that's how much to spend every year, I don't think that's necessarily inaccurate. I think that's probably an elevated number. It's probably a lot less than that. And a lot of that is, like I said, it's kind of like preventative maintenance. If they're able to clean the gravel off the curbs, and if they're able to clean out the bearing seats and some of the different things we've identified, it'll just help extend the life. And we recognize they don't always spot those things sometimes, and we're looking at it at a lot more close detail than they typically are when they're doing their drive-bys. So.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you very much for all the work and the clarifications that you provided. We really appreciate the presentation and all the data that comes to staff to incorporate into everything. So thank you again. And there is a report that is related to this, which is item 7.1. And we're going to take a look at, is there anything that you'd like to add from the staff point of view, or go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was gonna say, when it comes to the staff report, Ken's pretty much covered it all off. So there wasn't a whole bunch I was gonna add. I think I did want to just note, and I don't think this specific question came up, just about the decline in the BCIs over the last couple cycles. And in large part, we think that's to do with new culverts that have been picked up, both last cycle and then this cycle as well. And I would like to, and it was great that Ken referenced some of the differences between the bridges about 3 meters and larger and below, that those smaller ones are how the BCI, I think we said 50, I think it was, right? So I can just touch on briefly the cost for the maintenance of the culverts is substantially lower than what Ken has identified. So we do almost all of it in-house. And to give an example, last year we were about $100,000 on the cross culvert maintenance. So it was substantially lower. So.
Any staff questions for Rob or on the report? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Arts.
So you want the questions for Rob's report now? Okay. All right, through Madam Mayor to Rob then. Like where I live, there's a lot of culverts that are getting in bad shape. I've seen a couple of them replaced. They're less than the 3 meters, so they won't be in this report. But as a farmer, we can't afford to have bridges go out, because for someone from the urban area to go around the block to go to work, that's not a big thing. But if you got land on this side of that bridge that's out and the other side, and you got to reroute and go down a road you don't use because it's too busy and the cars run you off the road, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think in the next few years, our priority should be to replace culverts that are in bad shape. And I'm pretty sure there's more out there than we think there is, because when I start walking through some of them, I went, that's not good. So that's my only concern, and that's my only preference. Thank you.
Did you want to respond?
Through Madam Mayor to Councilor Arts. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of small ones out there, and some of them are very difficult to locate depending on how it's been grown over in that area. So we have been adding them to our asset inventory over the last couple of years. We've been out with a student collecting locations, GPSing them and putting them in. Sometimes the getting the condition assessment on them is a little bit more tricky because you have the end exposed, but if it's a 450 millimeter diameter, it might be tough to see through it, right? So, but that's definitely on our radar. And as you know, we're always doing culvert replacements every year. So it's a matter of whether or not we're gonna have to ramp that up to replace some of these. And some of the smaller ones are also, they're not corrugated steel. Some of them are now HDPE, which you don't have the same issues with them rusting out. But.
Is there anyone else? I don't see any hands, so we do have a motion before us that council receive report PWE 41/2023, which is the 2023 structure inspection report be received for information. A mover, please, then a seconder. Councillor Arts, Councillor Heffernan, all in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Okay, thank you again. And we can move on now to the adoption of the minutes. The motion before us is that the minutes of the Middlesex Center Council meeting be, held on October 4th, 2023, be adopted as. Is there a mover, please, and a seconder? Councillor Burrs, Councillor Cates, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Consent agenda. There are 4 items here. We received these in one motion, but before I call that, is there anybody who'd like to speak to something or pull anything out for comment? I don't see any hands. In that case, the motion before us is that consent items 6.1 through 6.4 listed on the October 18th, 2023 agenda be adopted as recommended. And a mover, please, Councillor Cates and Councillor Heffernan, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. All right, moving on to staff reports. We've done 7.1. I'll move to 7.2 and ask the CAO to provide an overview of that report.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through the chair to members of council, before you is council report with respect to the results of an RFP that the municipality undertook starting earlier this year with respect to our municipal general insurance program. This is something that has not been done for quite some time. And so we took it upon ourselves based on year-over-year budgets to undertake a review. The review was done with the assistance of an expert in the insurance field and industry. And we did the RFP, which received 3 submissions. Before you is the rated score based on the evaluation process and weighted score that was done with the assistance of the expert that assisted municipal staff. And so the results indicate that Marsh Canada Limited is the selected company that we will transition to effective January 1st. In your council report, there's rationale that provides the recommendation as to why the decision is to move to Marsh Canada. And what I can tell members of council is that our coverages for our premiums will remain the same, if not better, with respect to all the coverages for loss, risk management, and there are other advantages of the transition. And the last point I will note is that the broker will be continuing on with the municipality to assist us through the transition period, and just to help us with making sure all of our coverages are intact, just making sure that all of the administrative work is done, and just provides an opportunity to have additional oversight for us as we manage this change. But I'm happy to take any questions from council.
Working.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, questions, comments? I'll start with you, Councillor Heffernan.
The mayor too, Michael. So I noticed that this is for a 1-year term. First of all, I was quite shocked that there was a $300,000 difference. It's huge. It's a 1-year term with 4 additional 1-year periods. Are we obligated to keep with them? And would we be subject to price increases during this period potentially?
Through the chair to Councillor Heffernan, they are 1-year periods, so it's not a long-term commitment only because we've been with the existing company for such a long time. However, the recommendation is written as is, just to allow for that transition period and to make sure that there's continuity of service that doesn't bind the organization. Secondly, it's the premium amount that you have before you is for 1 year. So unfortunately, we can't predict the future. We could see double-digit increases. We could see minimal increases based on what happens with the ratings in the area that we live in. But at least it gives us quite a buffer with respect to our financial savings that we are going to realize.
I don't see any other hands, so there is a motion before us that report CAO 33/2023 regarding municipal insurance policy RFP be received, and that the municipal insurance policy be awarded to Marsh Canada Limited for a 1-year term with a premium in the amount of $878,318.52, including applicable taxes to take effect January 1st, 2024. And further, that the municipality may enter into 4 additional one-year periods with Marsh Canada Limited, subject to council and budget approvals. Is there a mover, please, and a seconder? Councillor Cates and Councillor Burrs, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, and now we can move on to Colin Toth, our fire chief, who's going to provide update on the master plan in this area.
Thank you, Mayor, through you to council. Since our approval of our master fire plan and community risk assessment earlier this year, fire services have been working diligently to knock off a number of our items that were mentioned in the plan. Currently, we are on track to complete all of our items that were mentioned in the 1 to 12 month period. And we have also been able to delve into a number of the 12 to 48 month items. So my goal is to bring you a report every 2 quarters or twice per year to ensure that you're updated on how we're progressing. Just a couple notable items that we are tackling. And these are prioritized in some cases outside of what the consultants have prioritized. Recruiting and retention, that's an important one we like to ensure we're on top of. Further deployment of our report management system. We're also looking at item 2B, which talks about response criteria and modification of that. And an item there that we're starting to deploy is our investigation team in support of our partner municipality and Middlesex Center. Another item that we're looking at tackling this year is our senior staff or senior administration chief high performance team workshop. So we're a little excited about that one. SOGs, those will fall in line with the different items that we're working on here as a guidance document to ensure that everybody is aware of how we're operating and what we're doing. And finally, our wellness program. So this is one that falls within the 12 to 48 month period. And it's one of the ones that items that are very important to us to make sure that our people are supported mental health wise and others. So that is planned to be deployed January 2024. That's all I have. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Thank you for the report. Are there questions from council? I don't see any hands, and in that case, the motion is that report FS 06-2023 regarding the Fire Services Master Plan progress update be received for information. Mover, please, Councillor Cates and Councillor Heffernan, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Okay, the first we have a first planning item here. It's a consent application for 12538 Mile Road. Dan Fitzgerald is going to be presenting that report.
Through the chair, thanks, Madam Mayor and members of council. So as mentioned, consent file B13-2023 is an application for a surplus dwelling severance that's located at 12538 Mile Road. So just as a bit of history on this one, the application was referred for a public meeting of council on June 21st. Council did refer the application back to staff for further review with the direction of trying to get the well included on the severed parcel. So the applicant has revised the plans. They are now requesting a revised area of 1.77 acres for the severed lot. And really that increase in size is essentially to include the area where the well sits towards the back of the property. Conditions have been added as well to the report, which do ensure that all other requirements are met. And as well, staff have reviewed the revised proposal against the provincial policy statement, the county official plan, as well as the local official plan. We are confident consolidation is occurring on this particular site, and that given that the revision has occurred to the area of the septic and well will also be located on the severed lands. I would note to council that the applicant has requested permission subsequently to writing the report to establish an easement for the existing hydro service, which is to be split between the severed and retained parcel, and also to establish a shared access easement. Generally, staff don't have concerns with establishing easements for a shared hydro line for the severed and retained parcel, as well as a shared access easement into the property. It would effectively reduce the potential loss of agricultural lands by not having two accesses coming into the shared lands. So to that end, staff are recommending that condition number 13, 15, and 16 in the staff report be amended by adding the following language to the end of the respective sentences. And that is, or to be permitted to remain subject to the establishment of an easement through consent. So that wording has been provided to the clerk and deputy clerk for council consideration. Additionally, I would also note that condition number 11, it should read that the revised lot dimension, or council revised lot dimensions, that the applicant demonstrate to the chief building official that the severed lands does maintain adequate access to water. So given the above, planning staff recommend approval of the consent application, subject against the conditions outlined in the planning report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that report. Does anyone on council want to ask about anything that's being presented? I just have one quick question. You're saying adequate access to water is, what exactly do you mean by adequate access to water? We have it or we don't, or the well is, would you just clarify for me? Thank you.
Yeah, so through the chair, just a fancy way of saying that the well is located on the severed lands. It was more so a contingency for me to ensure that council did agree with the revised area of the 1.77 meters to include the well. Otherwise, I would suggest that the previous condition still remain, so that the applicant be required to drill a new well should council not agree with the revised dimensions.
Thank you for that clarification. Is anyone on council wanting clarification questions for the planner? No? Okay, then we have a motion before us. That consent application B13 2023 filed by Joel Gordon Robson, J. Everett Robson, James Willard Robson, in order to sever a residence surplus to a farm operation as a result of consolidation from a lot municipally known as 12538 8 Mile Road be granted, and that the consent B3-13 2023 be subject to the 17 conditions noted in the staff report as amended per the planner's recommendation. And further, that the reasons for granting consent application B13 2023 include: proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement, proposal conforms to the County of Middlesex official plan and a Middlesex Centre official plan, and subject to the conditions, the proposal would comply with the Middlesex Centre comprehensive zoning bylaw. Is there a mover, please, and a seconder for that? Councillor Burrs and Councillor Arts. All in favor? And that is carried. Opposed? Sorry, opposed, and that is carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to, the Committee of Adjustment. We need a motion to move out of the regular session and into the adjustment. Thank you, Councillor Cates and Councillor Arts. All in favor? All right, so the motion is as printed and the time is 6:34. Okay, and I just want to make it a preamble so people who are here to attend know how it's going to work. First of all, members of the public that wish to receive further notification on any of the minor variance applications being considered today, I ask that you please send an email to the planning at middlesexcentre.ca requesting further notification. Please be advised that comments expressed and written material presented are a matter of public record. If you have questions on any of the applications being heard today, we ask that you direct those to the appropriate planner on file. Members of the public that have requested to speak will be given a maximum of 10 minutes to address council and provide comments on the applications. In keeping with our procedural bylaw and our R-zone policy, I would remind all of our meeting participants to use respectful language and uphold our values of cooperation, trust, and openness. So there is an order of proceedings, and it's the same for each of the applications, and it is as follows. First of all, I will ask the planner to explain the purpose of the application and hearing and present the staff report. Then the applicant or their agent has an opportunity to speak to their application. The public who have registered to speak or who are here in attendance will be asked for their comments. Please remember to state your name so that it can be added, noted into the minutes of the meeting. The municipal clerk or planner will note additional comments that have been received from circulated agencies and the public not included in the planning report. Then I'll turn to the committee and ask for any questions of the applicant and or the staff. And then finally, I'll ask council to consider, or the committee, pardon me, to consider motions regarding the applications. So I'm going to start then with the first item. Let me just get it up here. 8.1, which is a minor variance file. And I just look at this, it was the planner here. Marion, there you go. All right, so the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this staff report is to provide the committee with a recommendation regarding a minor variance application for the block 126 of the Kilworth Heights West subdivision. This property is also known as phase 2 of the Aura condominium development. So this property is located on the north side of Doan Drive and the south side of Blended Drive, just east of Crestview. And the purpose and effect of the application is to seek relief from the zoning bylaw as it relates to the minimum front yard setback requirements within the urban residential third density exception 9 zone, or the UR3-9 zone. The applicant requests a minimum front yard setback of 3 meters for unit 61 only, whereas the zoning bylaw requires a minimum of 6 meters. So the effect of this proposal is to facilitate the extension of a sidewalk on the northwest corner of this unit as a result of feedback from staff through the site plan review process. There are no changes to the location of the dwelling or the townhouse block that are proposed by the applicant. This application was circulated to area residents, agencies, and staff. At the time of writing this report and leading up to the committee meeting, we have not received any feedback or correspondence from area residents. The municipality's Director of Public Works and Engineering reviewed this application and has no concerns with the requested variance, as it does not change the distance from the travel lane to the proposed building. Finally, planning staff did evaluate the request against the 4 tests of the minor variance and determined that it meets the intent of the zoning bylaw and the official plan and does not result in a significant change to the built form or the proposed plan of condominium. Given the aforementioned, planning staff are satisfied that the proposed minor variance can be supported and recommend that the subject application be granted as proposal meets the 4 tests of the minor variance. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report. Is an applicant or the agent here to speak to this file? Okay. Any members of the public who would like to address this matter? Alrighty. I don't have anything from you, so I'm going to look at the committee then. Are there questions, comments? Nope. Okay, then in that case, I will look to the committee then. We have a motion before us, and that is that minor variance application A 18-2023 filed by Monteith Brown Planning Consultants on behalf of 2638477 Ontario Limited for relief from the zoning bylaw in order to establish a minimum front yard setback for a residential building of 3.0 meters for unit 61, whereas the zoning bylaw requires a minimum front yard setback of 6 meters for property legally 3 M801 of Middlesex Center be granted, and that the reasons for granting the minor variance application A12-2023 include the request complies with the general intent and purpose of Middlesex Center's official plan and the comprehensive zoning bylaw, The request is minor in nature and the request represents appropriate development on the subject property. Do I have a mover? Councillor Burrs, Councillor Cates, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Moving on to 8.2, and that is your file, Dan. You may have.
Through the chair, thanks members of the committee. So item 8.2 on the agenda this evening is application for minor variance A19/2023. And the purpose of that is to permit the construction of an additional accessory building on the lands. The applicant is requesting a maximum overall total of 5.5% lot coverage for all accessory structures that are located on the lot. Whereas the zoning bylaw permits a maximum size of 3%. So the lot is located in Kamoka and is municipally addressed 150 Railway Avenue. The lands are generally surrounded by low density residential development in the format of single family homes. As the land contains an existing single detached dwelling, it also contains an existing 22 square meter shed, which is used for storage. The applicant is again seeking permission to construct one additional accessory structure in the format of a detached garage at a size of approximately 87 square meters, which is intended for personal use. Given the maximum size permissions, the applicant is seeking permission to increase the maximum overall permissible size for an accessory building by a total of 1.5%. Planning staff have reviewed the proposal against the Planning Act test for a minor variance. Staff are not anticipating any negative impacts to adjacent properties and as such believe the proposal meets the 4 tests of the Act. Given the above, staff are recommending approval of a minor variance file number A19/2023. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that report. The clerk has indicated that the applicant is attending virtually. Would you like to make any comments, Mr. Estelle?
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I don't have any particular comments, no, other than we've resided there for almost, well, more than 20 years, and we plan to stay there for another 20, but it's just a personal garage. Our cars, some toys. It's just slightly oversized double car garage is all we're asking for.
Okay, thank you. I will then look to the members of the public. Is there anyone here who wants to speak to this file? I don't see any hands. Okay, no comments received from anyone. So committee, are there questions, comments? I see nothing. So there is a motion before us that the minor variance application A19/2023 filed by Steve Esdale to permit a maximum lot coverage of 5.5% for accessory buildings for property municipally known as 150 Railway Ave be granted. And that the reasons for granting minor variance application A19/2023 include the request complies with the general intent and purpose of Middlesex Center's official plan and comprehensive zoning bylaw. The request is minor in nature and the request represents appropriate development on the subject property. Is there a mover, please, and a seconder? Councillor Cates and Councillor Heffernan. All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. All right, moving on to 8.3, which is the application for minor variance, and that is your file, Marion.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and through you to the committee. The purpose of this report is to provide the committee with a recommendation regarding a minor variance for 9890 Ivan Drive, which is located on the north side of Ivan Drive and west of Kamoka Road. So the purpose of this application is to seek relief from the zoning bylaw as it relates to the maximum permissible gross floor area in the agricultural zone for an accessory building. The applicant is requesting a maximum size of 287.72 square meters or 0.7% of lot coverage, whereas the zoning bylaw permits a maximum size of the lesser of 165 square meters or 3% of the lot coverage. And in this case, the maximum permissible size would be 165 square meters. The effect of this proposal is to facilitate the construction of a 1.5-story accessory building, which would consist of a pool house, some storage area, as well as a garage. Floor plans and elevations were provided by the applicant and are appended to the staff report for additional details. So the subject property has an area of approximately 100 acres and contains an existing dwelling, farm buildings, as well as active agricultural lands. A portion of the lands are also regulated by the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority. Generally, the lands are also surrounded by agricultural fields and rural residential uses. So this application was circulated to area residents, agencies, and staff. Staff did not provide did not receive any correspondence from any of the area residents at the time of this report or leading up to this meeting. St. Clair Region Conservation Authority did advise that the proposed building encroaches into the regulated area and that written permission will be needed prior to obtaining a building permit. So staff evaluated the request against the 4 tests of a variance and determined that the request is minor, subject to some conditions, as it still meets the intent of the zoning bylaw and official plan, and is not anticipated to negatively impact the long-term viability of the agricultural uses on this land or abutting properties, or impact the neighboring properties. So staff do recommend 2 conditions that limit the size of the proposed accessory building to the lesser of 287.2 square meters or the footprint of the dwelling, and that the accessory building cannot be used for any type of commercial business. So given the aforementioned, planning staff are satisfied that the proposed variance can be supported with conditions and recommend that the subject application be granted as the proposal meets the 4 tests of a minor variance. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report. Is anyone here to speak to this? Would you like to comment or are you just attending? Yeah, come forward. When I turn mine off, it'll be dark, but if you push yours, it'll come on and then we will be able to hear you.
I don't really have any comments other than I didn't fully understand the conditions, or if I wasn't aware that there was conditions. So could you repeat the conditions?
Do you want to repeat those, Marion, or just run through and explain what they are?
Absolutely. So there are 2 conditions that are recommended by staff. The first is to have the maximum size of the building at 287 square meters, which is what was proposed on the site plan. And then the second condition is to essentially prohibit any commercial uses from being run out of that building. So you wouldn't be able to run a home occupation or a home industry out of that building.
All right, thank you. So the proposed size is okay. I just want to be clear. Okay. So that's fine. And no business intents are intended. Thank you.
The other part that was noted was there's a conservation authority condition on the that would precede any planning condition.
Yes, so the Conservation Authority did recommend that if this minor variance is granted, that you would need a permit from them before applying for a building permit.
That's fair. I did it with the last renovation, so I'm aware of that. So perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's all of the applicants' questions. Is there anyone here in the public who wishes to address? I don't see any hands. In that case, there haven't been any other comments circulated. I'll look to the committee to ask any questions they have for the applicant. And I don't see any hands. So there is a motion before us, and that is that the minor variance application. I turned it over. A3. I'm okay. Good. That the minor variance application 8/20/23 filed by Pineview Acres Limited for relief from the zoning bylaw in order to permit an increase to the maximum permission size of the accessory building for property municipally known as 9890 Ivan Drive be granted, subject to the following conditions: that the size of the accessory building be limited to the lesser of 287.72 square meters or the footprint of the dwelling, and that the building shall be used only in accordance with permissions of the zoning bylaw, and that the building shall not be used for any type of commercial business. And further, that the reasons for granting the minor variance application A 2023 include the request complies with the general intent and purpose of the Middlesex Central Official Plan and Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw. The request is minor in nature, and the request represents appropriate development on the subject property. Is there a mover, please, and a seconder? Councillor Arts and Councillor Heffernan, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to number 8.4. This is yours again, Marion. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report again is to provide the committee with a recommendation regarding a minor variance for lots 8 and 11 only within the phase 5 of the Timberwalk subdivision in Ilderton. These lots are located on a proposed extension of Timberwalk Trail just south of Songbird Lane. So the purpose of this application is to seek relief from the zoning bylaw as it relates to the exterior side yard setback requirement, where the exterior side yard is adjacent to a front yard of an abutting lot within the urban residential first density exception 25 zone. So the applicant is requesting minimum exterior side yard setback of 4 meters for, again, lots 8 and 11 only, where the zoning bylaw requires a minimum of 6 meters. The effect of this proposal is to increase the building envelope to provide greater flexibility in the building plans and placement of a future dwelling. So subject lands are surrounded by vacant land for future low density residential development, a woodlot, future medium density residential development, and existing low density development to the north. The application was circulated to area residents, agencies, and staff. Staff did not receive any correspondence from any area residents at the time of writing this report. The municipality's Director of Public Works and Engineering reviewed the application and requested that a condition be added to ensure driveways must be situated off the lot frontage, since the 4 meter setback on the exterior side will not allow for sufficient space to park a car in the driveway without encroaching the municipal boulevard. Staff did review the request against 4 tests of a minor variance and determined that the request is minor, subject to conditions, as it still meets the intent of the zoning bylaw and official plan for residential development and is not anticipated to negatively impact neighboring properties or interfere with sight lines or visibility for vehicles and pedestrians traveling along Timberwalk Trail. So staff recommend 1 condition as a result of the comments from Public Works and Engineering. So specifically, this condition will only permit an attached garage and driveway within the exterior side yard where it is setback 6 meters from the side lot line. So given the aforementioned, planning staff is satisfied that the proposed minor variance can be supported with conditions and recommend that the subject application be granted as the proposal meets the 4 tests of a minor variance. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report. And I understand that Alex Heston is online. Would you like to speak to the file?
Yes, please. So through the chair, good evening to members of committee and council. My name is Alexandra Hassan, speaking on behalf of Sipton Properties, the applicant and owner of the lands this evening. I just wanted to note that we have reviewed staff's report and that we are in favor of the recommendation to grant the minor variance applicable to 2 lots in phase 5 of Timberwalk subdivision, and that we're also supportive of the wording of the condition as provided by staff. So thank you for your time and consideration of the application this evening, and I am available for questions if there's any questions of council. Thank you.
And thank you. Is anyone in the public here to speak to that application? I don't see any hands, and no one has registered, and we don't have any additional comments, so I'll look to the committee. Questions? I'll start with Deputy Mayor and move down to Councillor Bruce.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not sure if this goes to Rob or he goes to. Saying that there have been drainage issues in Timberwalk, will this side yard variance affect drainage, or be looking at that to make sure it doesn't create more drainage issues? Because I've received calls of drainage issues up in that area, and I just want to see us create more
Yeah, through the mayor to deputy mayor, whether it's a 4 meter setback or a 6 meter setback, it's not going to change the drainage on the side lots. It'll be graded so that for the house drains out the curb either way, so it'll have no impact.
Thank you, your worship. To the applicant's representative, you said you've approved the condition, and the condition from the Director of Public Works and Engineering, no problem with that. This is the,
Oh, sorry.
this is a thing to ensure driveways must be situated off of lot frontage, since a 4 meter setback on the exterior side will not allow sufficient space to park a car in the driveway without the limits of the lot. You've taken that into consideration. You agree with it?
Through the chair, yeah, so it's our understanding of the condition that the main building could still extend to the 4 meter setback from the exterior lot line, but that if there was side access provided with a garage and a driveway, that it would have to maintain that 6 meters to allow sufficient space for a vehicle to be able to park in the driveway.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Arts.
Through your Madam Mayor, I'm not sure who addressed this to, either Marion or the planner, but I understand the 6 meters, the driveway and the garage has to be that far away for visibility. But I want to make for sure whoever buys this house realizes that their car can't be within 6 meters of the property line either, because you know what it's like. Things don't fit and you just sort of sprawl every direction. So for a safety standpoint, I don't know if you can do that, but that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So I think just to be clear, so the issue is that with the reduction of the side lot to 4 meters is that they can't have a driveway there. So as long as they have the driveway fronting to the frontage of the property, they'll have the 6 meter setback to the front of the house. So that's fine. That's the standard. So we're just asking that there be no driveway to the side lots.
Yeah, I was just getting at down the road, people always, oops, driveway's not wide enough, but they can't. So, okay, I understand. Thanks.
Is there anything else? I don't see any hands, and I know no one's joined in while we've been chatting here. So we do have a motion before us that minor variance application A21-2023 filed by Sifton Properties Limited for relief from the zoning bylaw in order to establish a minimum exterior side yard setback of 4 meters, whereas the zoning bylaw requires a minimum exterior side yard setback of 6 meters for properties legally described as Lot 8 and Lot 11 of 33M-836 in the municipality of Middlesex Centre be granted, subject to the following conditions: that an attached garage maintain a minimum exterior side yard setback of 6 meters, that is 19.7 feet, where a driveway is proposed in the exterior side yard for Lot 8 and 11. And that the reasons for granting the minor variance application A21-2023 are that the request complies with the general intent and purpose of Middlesex Centre's official plan and comprehensive zoning bylaw. The request is minor in nature and the request represents appropriate development on the subject property. Is there a mover, please, and a seconder? Councillor Arts and Councillor Heffernan, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And moving on now to 8.5, and again, that is yours, Marion.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And this report again is to provide the committee with a recommendation regarding a minor variance for block 55 within phase 5 of the Timberwalk subdivision in Ilderton. This block is located on the proposed extension of Arrowwood Path just west of Timberwalk Trail. So the purpose of this application is to seek relief from the zoning bylaw as it relates to the front yard setback for units 15, 16, 19, 28, and 31. Seeks relief from the minimum side yard setback on the side abutting a public street, specifically for unit 1, and seeks relief from the maximum density from the urban residential third density exception 12 zone. So specifically, the applicant is requesting a front yard setback for those 5 units of 5.5 meters, whereas the zoning bylaw requires a minimum of 6 meters. The second request is for minimum side yard setback abutting a public street of 3 meters, whereas the zoning bylaw requires 6 meters, and a maximum density of 31 units per hectare, whereas the zoning bylaw requires a maximum or sets a maximum of 30 units per hectare. So the effect of this proposal will facilitate the development of 31 townhouse dwelling units within a vacant plan condominium. The subject lands are surrounded by vacant land for future low density development, a woodlot, future medium density residential development, existing low density residential development to the north, and existing agricultural lands to the west. So this application was circulated to area residents, agencies, and staff. Staff did not receive any correspondence from any area residents or agencies at the time of writing this report. The municipality's Director of Public Works and Engineering reviewed the application and requested that a condition be added to ensure sufficient parking space is provided for at least one vehicle to be accommodated within the front yards of units 15, 19, 28, and 31, and 16 as well, as it relates to the requested reduction of the front yard setback. Further, a condition is requested to require a driveway for unit 1 to connect to the internal private road only and not the public right of way, preventing any possibility to connect to that public right of way. So staff evaluated the request against the 4 tests of a variance and determined that the request is minor, subject to the conditions, as it still meets the intent of the zoning bylaw and official plan for residential development. The increase of the maximum density will result in 1 additional unit, which will not significantly impact servicing, traffic, or demand on community uses. The reduction of the side yard setback abutting the public road for unit 1 can be considered minor, since the turning circle that it sides onto is intended to be temporary, and when available, the future road extension will remove that turning circle and provide additional land between the dwelling and the travel lane of Arrowwood Path. And lastly, the reduction of the side yard will not negatively impact the visibility for any pedestrians or vehicles along Arrowwood Path. And finally, the reduction of the front yard setback for those 5 units are attributed to the curvature of the roadway. However, there's still sufficient space in the front yard for access to each dwelling for each vehicular access, and the applicant has provided sufficient space for at least 1 vehicle in each driveway as shown on their site plan. So staff recommend that the 2 conditions, as a result of comments from the Public Works and Engineering Department, are added to the decision. Given the aforementioned, planning staff are satisfied that the proposed variance can be supported with the conditions and recommend that the application be granted, as the proposal meets the 4 tests of the minor variance. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report, Ms. Desan. Would you like to comment on this file?
Yes, please, just briefly. Good evening again to members of council. Just speaking on behalf of Sifton Properties, once again, the applicant and owner of the lands for this file. We have reviewed staff's report and would just like to know once again that we're in favor of the recommendation to grant the minor variance applicable to Block 55 in Timberwalk subdivision, phase 5 of development. Further, we're also supportive of the conditions provided by staff. I would like to know, and just in response to condition number 2, that sufficient space has been provided to accommodate the 1.5 parking spaces required per townhouse unit in accordance with the zoning bylaw. However, we can certainly look to have our site plan revised to provide that additional clarity as requested by staff. Thank you again for your time and consideration of the application, and I am available for questions if there's any questions of council.
Thank you. And are there any members of the public who'd like to speak to this? Seeing none, then there are no comments. I'll look to council then. Questions, comments? I don't see any hands. In that case, there is a motion before us. And that is that minor variance application A22, 2023, filed by Sifton Properties Limited for relief from the zoning bylaw in order to establish a minimum front yard setback of 5.5 meters for units 15, 16, 19, 28, and 31 a minimum side yard setback on the side abutting a public street of 3 meters for unit 1 and a maximum density of 31 units per hectare, whereas the zoning bylaw requires a minimum front yard setback of 6 meters, a minimum side yard setback on the side abutting a public street of 6 meters, and a maximum density of 30 units per hectare for property legally described as block 55 of 33M-836 in the municipality of Middlesex Centre be granted, subject to the following conditions: that the driveway of unit 1 is located in the front yard of unit and connected to the internal private road, and that the driveway of unit 15, 16, 19, 28, and 31 contains sufficient space for at least one parking space in compliance with the zoning bylaw. And further, that the reasons for granting minor variance application A22, 2023 are that the request complies with the general intent and purpose of Middlesex Centre's official plan and comprehensive zoning bylaw, and the request is minor in nature, and the request represents appropriate development on the subject property. Move it, please, in a second. Councillor Cates and Councillor Burrs, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. And we will now move into public meetings. So first of all, we need to have a motion that the Committee of Adjustment adjourn at 7:06 p.m. and council resume the regular meeting, and that council move into public meetings again at 7:06 pursuant to the Planning Act RSO 1990 as amended to consider applications listed on the October 18th, 2023 council agenda. So again, members of the public who wish to receive any notification on the applications being considered, please send an email to planning@Middlesex Centre requesting further notification, and be advised that the comments expressed and written material presented are a matter of public record. If anyone has questions on the applications being heard this evening, we ask that you direct those to the appropriate planner on file. And again, the same rules apply, 10 minutes maximum to address council. And we have our procedural bylaw and our zone policy to make sure that we use respectful language and uphold our values of cooperation, trust, and openness. The order of proceedings is the same as we just experienced in the previous session. So I'm not going to repeat that. We'll start with number 9.1, which is a consent application for 12674 12 Mile Road, and we'll have Dan Fitzgerald, County Planner, who to present that report, please.
Through the chair, thanks, Madam Mayor and members of council. So first file we have here, item 9.1 on the agenda, is an application for consent, file number B19 2023. The purpose and effect of the application is to dispose of a house which has been deemed surplus to a farm operation consolidation. The applicant is requesting to sever the existing dwelling for the purposes of sale. The applicant is requesting a severed lot with frontage of approximately 20 meters, as well as an area of approximately 1.29 acres. The lands contain an existing single detached dwelling, as well as the associated private services in the format of a well and septic system. It also contains an existing accessory structure, which is generally used for dry storage. The accessory structure does not maintain hydro service as identified by the applicant, and it would or is contemplated to be remain intact with the existing remnant farm parcel upon disposal of the severed lands. The property is located within an existing agricultural area, and it is surrounded by large lot agricultural operations, which are in crop production. It is located on the north side of 12 Mile Road and is municipally addressed 12674 12 Mile Road. I have reviewed the application against the provincial policy statement, the county official plan, as well as the local official plan. Through my review, I am satisfied that the proposed severance is the result of a farm consolidation, which deems the residents surplus to the owner's needs. The lot is of sufficient size to maintain private services, and the house has or is considered to be habitable, and conditions are included within recommendations to ensure that it is. As well, additional conditions have been included to ensure that the severance meets all other requirements as established in the official plan, including requirements to rezone the severed and retained parcels. So given above, I am recommending approval of severance application B19 2023 and I'm available to answer any questions that council may have. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. I'm looking for an applicant or an agent to speak to this file. Oh, Ms. Sinclair, if you'd like to take the stand, and then I'll turn mine off, and if you could turn yours on to speak.
Thank you. My name is Courtney Sinclair. I'm here as the agent for the applicant. I don't have any comments at this time, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public here to address this file? And I don't see any hands there. So no comments again. So are there questions, comments? Yes, go ahead, Councilor Case.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. I guess to Dan. I just wanted to, I noted when I read all of this that under the agency comments, and we have Osabo Conservation on there, but when you read Osabo's letter, it also says that this property falls under St. Clair. So I just wanted to note that it's not on this list.
Yeah, through the chair. This is a bit of a unique circumstance of a property. It's actually regulated by 2 conservation authorities. So the portion that is regulated by ABCA is not affected by the severance, whereas I believe I'm coming to a blank of the other St. Clair, I believe it is. Yeah, and we unfortunately did not receive comment from St. Clair on the application.
Is there anyone else? All right, so if there are no more questions from the committee, then we can consider the motion, which is that the consent application B19 2023 filed by Courtney Sinclair on behalf of Joel Gordon Robson, J. Everett Robson, and James Willard Robson in order to sever residence surplus to a farm operation as a result of consolidation from a lot municipally known as 12674 12 Mile Road be granted. And that the consent B19 2023 be subject to the 17 conditions that are noted in the staff report. And further, that the reasons for granting the consent application include that the proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement. It conforms to the County of Middlesex official plan and the Middlesex Centre official plan, and subject to the conditions, the proposal would comply with the Middlesex Centre comprehensive zoning bylaw. Do I have a mover, please, and a seconder? I have Councillor Heffernan and Deputy Mayor Brennan, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. 9.2, I'll look to the planner, Mary Cabral, County Planner, is going to present this one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to Council. The purpose of this report is to provide a recommendation to Council regarding a rezoning request for files ZBA 12 and ZBA 13 2023 for 15675 9 Mile Road and vacant land on 9 Mile Road. The properties are located on the south side of 9 Mile and west of Clark Road. So the purpose of the rezoning applications are to implement a condition of consent imposed by Council for consent B08 2023, which conditionally severed a 480 square meter parcel of land from each property in order to be added to the other property. The parcel of land from 15675 9 Mile Road is proposed to be rezoned from surplus residence to agricultural no residence, and the parcel of land from the vacant land is proposed to be rezoned from agricultural no residences to surplus residence. This application was circulated to area residents, agencies, and staff. Staff did not receive any correspondence at the time of writing this report or leading up to this public meeting. This request is generally consistent with the policies of the PPS, county, and local official plan, as it facilitates a land swap that retains active agricultural lands and limits the extent of the residential use on the property. As such, planning staff have determined that the requested zoning bylaw amendments to rezone each severed parcel is consistent with all applicable policies, and planning staff recommend approval of the applications. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report. I'm looking for anyone here who would like to speak to the file? No, okay. There was no member of the public who's coming to who's registered, and we have no additional comments, so I can turn to council then. Is there anything here? And I don't see any hands, so we do have a motion before us that the zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 12/2023 and ZBA 13/2023 filed by Michael Moyer and Walter Moyer, Robert Costello and Gloria Costello for the severed parcels of consent application B-08/2022 in order to implement a boundary adjustment between two properties known legally as concession 8, part lot 5 and concession 8, part lot 5, RP 33 R 2597 in Middlesex Center, that is in the geographic township of London, County of Middlesex, be approved. Is there a mover, please, and a seconder? Councillor Heffernan, Councillor Arts, all in favor? And that is carried. Alrighty, I have 9.3 and that is yours again. Go ahead, Mary.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and 3 to council. So the purpose of this staff report is to provide a recommendation regarding file ZBA 15/2023 for 20706 the Neck Road, which is located on the east side of the Neck and south side of Gainsborough. The purpose of this application is to temporarily rezone the lands to permit the construction of a new single detached dwelling while living in the existing dwelling on the property. The temporary use would apply for a period of up to 3 years, and upon expiration or completion of the new dwelling, the existing residents would need to be removed from this property. The requested application is generally consistent with all applicable policies as it relates to permitting a single family dwelling on an agricultural parcel. The application was circulated to area residents, agencies, and staff. Again, we have not received any correspondence from members of the public or agencies leading up to this meeting. Municipal staff have requested that the applicant submit a deposit of $15,000 and enter into an agreement with the municipality to ensure removal of the existing residents. Such planning staff have determined that the requested zoning bylaw amendment for temporary use for a period of up to 3 years is consistent with all applicable policies, including the Middlesex Center official plan. And staff recommend that the application be approved and that the owner enter into a temporary use agreement with the municipality that will require the removal of that existing dwelling and submit a total deposit of $15,000 to the municipality. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report. Is the applicant here? Would you like to speak to the file or comment on anything? Again, I'm going to turn mine off. If you push yours, it'll become live.
So thank you. I don't really have anything to say other than we just want to build a beautiful home on a beautiful property. So that's it. I can answer any questions if you have them.
Okay, thank you for that. The clerk has indicated there are no other members of the public who registered to speak, and there are no other delegates who jumped in. It's up to council. Anything you'd like to ask? I see shaking of heads. So we have a motion before us then. And that is that zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 15/2023 for a temporary use zone filed by Joshua Fleming and Jasmine Fleming to permit two single detached dwellings on one property for up to 3 years to allow a new residence to be constructed on the land known as 2076 Bannock Road be approved, and that the owner be required to enter into a temporary use agreement with the municipality and submit a deposit of $15,000 to ensure the removal of the existing residence. Do I have a mover and a second? Councillor Cates and Councillor Heffernan. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you for your patience. Good luck. Okay, now that we're done with all the planning items, council has to rise from public meetings, and the motion is that public meetings adjourn at 7:19 p.m. and council resume the regular meeting. Councillor Burrs, thank you, and Councillor Arts, thank you. All in favor? And we are back in regular session. There are no additions here. There are 7 correspondence items here. Is there anything anyone would like to speak to? There are a number of people from, yes, conservation authorities. I'll start with you, Councillor Cates.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, for two things. First of all, I just wanted to say that it's a great update from Blue Water. If anybody, be sure to read this. Lots of good information there. And the other thing is 2.2, the Catherine Fife. I'm just wondering if we need to have a motion to support her.
Okay, thank you. The clerk will address that.
Thank you, through the chair. As you'll note, typically when we receive these requests for support, we receive a sample or a draft resolution for councils to consider. In this case, the MPP for Waterloo did not provide any sample wording or any sample resolution. That said, in preparation for this meeting, I went ahead and obtained a similar resolution that has been adopted by another Ontario municipality, specifically addressing support for Bill 21. So should a member of council wish to move that motion, I'd be happy to read back and clarify that motion. So I would just need confirmation that council is wishing to move and second that motion.
Do I infer from your question that you'd like to make a motion? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we support this. Thank you.
So if we have a seconder for that motion, then the clerk will read it and we can have a vote. I have the deputy mayor and go ahead, James.
Well, thank you. And through the chair, whereas there are 38,000 people on the wait list for long-term care, and whereas the median wait time for a long-term care bed has risen from 99 days in 2011-2012 to 171 days in the most recent data collected in 2020 and 2021. And whereas according to Home Care Ontario, the cost of a hospital bed is $842 a day, while the cost of a long-term care bed is $126 a day. And whereas couples should have the right to live together as they age. And whereas Ontario seniors have worked hard to build this province and deserve dignity and care. And whereas Bill 21 amends the Resident Bill of Rights in the Fixing Long-Term Care Act to provide the resident with the right upon admission to continue to live with their spouse or partner. Therefore, the Council for the Municipality of Middlesex Centre calls upon the Legislative Assembly of Ontario to direct the Minister of Long-Term Care to call Bill 21 to the Standing Committee on Social Policy. And if I may comment, Chair, what this essentially states is that this is Council lending its support to ask that Bill 21, which has been proposed by the MPP for Waterloo, be brought forward to the Standing Committee for a vote. And secondly, that this motion would be shared with the appropriate ministry for long-term care. Thank you.
Does anyone want any clarification or question anything that the clerk? Okay, in that case, I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Is there anything else that anyone else would like to comment on from the Conservation Authority they represent or anything else that's in this document? Seeing none, then we have a motion before us that correspondence items 12.1 through 12.7 listed on the, well, with the exception of the one that we've moved, are received as information. A mover, please, and a seconder. Councillor Cates and Councillor Heffernan. And that is carried. I'm looking to the Deputy Mayor to provide us with an update from County Council from the meeting of October 10th there.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It was a rather short meeting, for our shorter meetings that we've had. The main speaker was the health unit. They're talking about budget talks, and they had a surplus in the year 2022. Of which $80,676 was the county's share. That was used to put towards the bank loan for the refit of City Plaza when we moved in there. The new vaccine that's out for seniors right now, at that time they had 400 to 500 doses left. They were going rather rapidly until they got more in. And the Warner's banquet, for those that are interested, when we can go back this year, will be November the 18th. So you can probably go through James if anybody is interested in going to that. Talk to James and he can secure your ticket. Thank you.
Questions on that? No? Okay. Is there any other business? I don't see any. In that case, then we have the bylaws. The motion before us is that bylaws 2023, number 109 through 111, listed on the October 18th, 2023 agenda be approved. Is there a mover, please, and a second? Councillor Heffernan, and Councillor Cates, thank you. All in favor? And that is carried. And now we need a motion to adjourn. It is that the council for the municipality of Middlesex Centre adjourns the October 18th, 2023 council meeting at 7:25 p.m. Thank you, Councillor Burrs and Councillor Arts. All in favor?